Hello everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. You'd hope so after I spent so much money on a microphone setup, despite not really knowing what I'm doing. Um, and hopefully everyone should be able to type in the chat room. So if you want to put in like a hi into the chat so I know that you're here and things are working. I love technology when it works. How are you all doing? How are you all doing today? Actually, I should ask, where's everybody coming in from? Thank you. Thank you very much. I did not pick my microphone setup. I have a friend of mine. His nickname is literally Mr. Mike Discipline. Because I used to do like these live streaming things with friends of mine. We'd raise money for charity, and the biggest habit we had was like talking over each other. So when I was getting into YouTube, I'm like, okay, I need a microphone. I'm going to ask Mr. Mike Discipline, um, and he will tell me what microphone to buy. So I literally just copied and pasted it. Right, we have where people are from. So we've got a lot of people in the US. Dallas, I've been to Dallas. I went to medieval times in Dallas because my American friend thought that was going to be very amusing, to have the British person go to medieval times. North coast of the USA, uh, Tanzania, Arizona. I went to Arizona. Look, I'm actually, repping my t-shirt. There we go. What microphone am I running? I'm running an Audio Technica 220 and a Scarlett Solo like audio interface, and it's connected with the fat cable. Yes, Focusrite. Hi from New Jersey. I'm going to actually go into the like New England area of America this year. Thank you. I've actually changed my background setup because it was kind of ugly before. These are all stickers, like all of the bright colors, they're all stickers. It's all stickers. And then that's my, hashtag badge life. Los Angeles, I've been to Los Angeles as well. Um, I liked Los Angeles actually. It wasn't too bad. It was like very pleasant when I went. It was like autumn and it felt like summer. What's Hackfest? I have to look it up. Right. So in terms of what we're doing today, guys, hopefully you already know because you've signed up to a webinar and you have presumably knew what you signed up for. Today, we're going to be doing some live hacking together. So I cannot hack live because it's not great. And I'm pretty sure the guy in legal would have questions for me about whether or not we can do that. So I will not be hacking a real website. I will be using OWASP Shop. I highly recommend that you hack a website though. Now, obviously, you're going to do that ethically and legally. It's either going to be, your own API, or if you're participating in a bug bounty program, an API of like a customer of theirs that you have permission to hack. Like, don't hack random websites because honestly, I'm telling you right now, if you're launching like one of my webinars, you do not want to start your career off with legal problems. It's not worth it. Trust me. It doesn't. It's not fun. So I have got OWASP Shop. You can also use OWASP Shop or another like CTF or whatever. It's completely up to you. I'm going to approach OWASP Shop as I have never looked at it before, as if I was testing a real company. And I'm going to walk you through the kind of steps that I go through and how I actually start to get like hacking on a target. Now, my suggestion here, and this is why I suggest you get your own website up or, do a CTF. What would be really great is you kind of will go through it together. I'll hack Shop, you'll hack a real website. If you do get paid a bounty, I will be asking for a commission though, because that was a team effort. I'm only joking, it's fine. So in terms of like what to target for this session, highly recommend a web-based API. While you can hack mobile apps, and I actually really love mobile app hacking, I think it's great. I don't necessarily recommend it because the approach is a little bit different. By the way, if you are interested, I might do like a mobile session if folks are actually interested and up for it. So in this session, we're basically going to be approaching a website as if we were like, we just got assigned it. It's a pen test. Somebody has said, hey, can you test our website? And you can follow the same steps we can. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can kind of get started looking at this application. I should say that I actually haven't finished OWASP Juice Shop, but I found some flags in OWASP Juice Shop, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. But the first thing I always do, no matter what I'm targeting, a CTF, a challenge, a real website, is I spend like a few, maybe hours, depending on the application, just looking at it and trying to understand what it does. And I know a lot of people will jump into, okay, we got to go recon. We got to get our recon scripts, my bash script, my Python script. I'm going to do all this recon. And then you kind of end up getting stuck because you're like, well, the recon is finished and I still don't know what to do. So this is why the first thing I recommend is always try and understand what's in front of you. Oh, I should say, by the way, if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. If you put them in the chat, obviously your name will be associated with them. If you want to ask anonymously, the Q&A will mean that I'll see it, but I don't think other people do. But you are welcome to use either, and certainly do, you know, ask questions, interact. I want these sessions to be interactive. I'm also going to ask you a few questions and have you interact too. So step one, look at what's in front of us. So the first thing I think when I look at this is I'm like, okay, this is an e-commerce application. I can buy things. So my brain is already thinking about kind of what that means for my hacking, because it means that I'm going to have some kind of payment system. I'm going to have some kind of like adding products to basket. I'm going to have some kind of being able to pay for stuff, maybe going through a payment flow. I'm going to have some kind of receiving, shipping, something like that. But it's always good to just double check your assumptions here. And I'll tell you why. Because for something like this is a very basic e-commerce application. When you start to actually look, though, at like maybe e-commerce websites, but if you look at big enterprise software, like the kind of stuff that Traceable protects, for example, you're looking at very, very complex, lots of moving parts. And with that kind of API, as a hacker, it's advantageous to you because that means there's lots of little nooks and crannies that you can go explore. However, that does mean as a kind of trade-off, it is very complicated. It is kind of hard to actually like distill. So my first tip, when you start, look at what's in front of you. Don't copy and paste anything. Don't try and get payloads working. Just use it as if you were like an actual user. So first thing I'm going to try and do is, you know, what can I do? I can read reviews. I can't add something to my cart, kind of expected. I've not actually logged in. I can see reviews, but I can't make them. Again, makes sense. I'm not logged in. And you see I've got a log on. Multiple ways to log in. I've got a use email password. I've also got a Google flow. When we think about APIs, we kind of think about two different things. One is the APIs that often power the back end of like highly interactive JavaScript apps. That's what OWASP Juice Shop is. It's mainly JavaScript. It's all powered by APIs on the back end. But we also have third parties. Now, third parties are often used for things like login flows, but also payment flows. And they can also be used to like send data around. So they're really good places to actually find vulnerabilities in because they are like more in like what data gets sent and then what data gets returned and how the application actually interprets that. This is why, by the way, like Traceable has third-party APIs as part of it. It's because these APIs are sending data externally, and that can be a risk just on its own. Think about like somebody putting sensitive data into ChatGPT. Like, here is a CSV of a bunch of people's social security numbers, right? Like, that's why. So always have a look out for where you can see third parties. Now, obviously, if I find a vulnerability in Google, that comes under Google's like authority. But if I'm finding a vulnerability in how this application talks to Google, that's an OAuth flow. And actually, recently, we did actually put together a really nice article that was written by our lovely research team about auth 0. Give me a second. Or OAuth, I should say. Yeah, here we go. Oh, everyone. This is an example of what this would look like actually in practice. I'm just going to put it on the screen. And you can see here that this was a single sign-on login flow, and you can see here that the this is the code that powered it. And we realized that you would be able to give it like a value of all, and it would give you back a bunch of people's like personal data. It's really interesting. Like, and you can see here we actually did disclose this, and it was resolved. But yeah, so the OAuth can be great places to find vulnerabilities. And again, especially at the start here, as I'm kind of walking through this, and as you walk through your own like targets here, you're not necessarily trying to find vulnerabilities at this point. We're trying to think and understand how this application works in context, fundamentally. So next thing I'm going to do is see what I can do. So I'm going to register an account. Because this is a CTF, I'm not going to put in a real email. I'm just going to do enough. Yeah, securely generate password. That sounds good. That's for when I inevitably forget the password. And we can go into here and then we can log in. And again, I'm not necessarily, even trying to capture this traffic in Burp, though I am, you can see it being captured here. Oh, I should actually talk about that. I'll talk about that in a second. But I'm just trying to understand the application. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I think people make with hacking. They forget to just see how the application works, see it in context, understand, how that is actually working together. So you can see how these are all green. This is because I'm using this add-on called PwnFox. And you can see that my purple ones over here are in like the purple tab are purple in Burp, and the green tab is green in Burp. This makes it a lot easier, by the way, to test for your classic OWASP API broken authorization vulnerabilities, your bolas, your IDORs, whatever you want to call them, broken function level authorization, broken property level authorization. It just adds that like a visual element to it. And what you'll see in the way I approach hacking is that I very much rely on my intuition and visuals. And that's because with APIs and API security more broadly, it's not necessarily about getting the right payload. It's far more about looking at the business logic of how the application works and targeting that instead. So if you think about like what an API hack looks like, it looks like legitimate traffic, because what we're doing is we're targeting things like the search functionality, right? Like people, if you search for something that doesn't exist, what happens? Or I'm just going to pick one of these at random, I'm going to go into here, add this to my basket. you can see we've got a get request here for basket 6, which is probably just information about my user's basket. And you can see this is what a success looks like. But if I try and change that 6 to a 5, it's fundamentally not anomalous because it's just another number that probably exists. So if I go into here and I'm going to go center repeater, and I'm going to change the 6 to a 1, this is classic testing for authorization issues, right? And see what happens. And as you can see, we got like a nice little flag up here. And as I'm kind of understanding how the application works, these are the kind of little tests that I'll do. And this is, by the way, why API is like security is so hard for defenders, is because, you know, that one doesn't look anomalous, but it's cross user, right? It's like classic IDOR. Are you going to find a vulnerability as easy as that in real software? Probably not. Are you going to find a vulnerability easier than that if you have a look at enough API endpoints? Yes. I have genuinely found vulnerabilities that are this. It's me poking around saying, oh, I wonder what happens if I change that to a 1. I'll try that. Oh, it worked. Oh, great. I found a vulnerability. And then they hand me $5,000. Like, that's sometimes just how hacking works. So first thing I'm doing is I'm trying to understand what's in front of me. So I'm going to go have a look at my basket, increase the quantity. I might go into, you know, checking out what happens. Let's put a UK KT 0. Perfect. I don't know how long zip codes are. Eight characters apparently. Manchester, because it's the best city on earth. And again, here I'm just trying to understand, you know, what actually happens here. You know, if I go in 1-day delivery, what does that do? You know, add a credit or debit card. I'm assuming this will just work on, because I wouldn't be so cruel as to actually have a card that requires like the actual verification, because like in the built into cards there's like verifications. You know, some other things that I'm noticing here is this idea of like a wallet. So if we can store money on this, there's a vulnerability there about, okay, can we add unlimited amounts? But I'll talk about that more in a second. So I'm literally just going to go through all of the flows I can. Like, I'm just kind of having, you know, a little poke around, basically. You know, maybe I'm going in here and going, I don't know. Maybe I'm going and setting a username or whatever. So once I actually understand how this application works, I can start to think about the attack surface. Now, I am not at this point writing detailed notes. I am not doing a full recon. You just don't have to with APIs. You just need to think about like what's actually in front of you. We're hacking the functionality here. We're hacking what's in front of us. And that's really, really important in API hacking, because if we start getting caught up in trying to discover every API endpoint, developers write APIs so differently. Like the way I would write an API as somebody who used to write APIs, I used to program a lot of in PHP. I've made APIs that use like XML. The way I would write an API may be very different to another development team and how they approach APIs. So I'm very much focused in on, okay, like what is this API in front of me, not trying to necessarily do a lot of reconnaissance. You can though. I mean, like Traceable has a product that is just, you know, his API reconnaissance using like data that we've collected. There's also open source tools as well. I recommend FFUF, by the way, if people are curious. And there's like a list, it's called API Roots Large, that will actually work with FFUF because it's just plain text. There's a question in the Q&A. So before doing any hacking on bug bounties, should we practice first? This is a really good question. It depends, unfortunately. So I had no practice in hacking before I found my first vulnerability. My first vulnerability was as easy as I'm going to change that number from a 1 to a 2. Saying that, I had a lot of experience as a developer. So I used to make APIs. I used to, I made an entire RESTful API. I made like data ingest platforms for my employer. I've done like full CRM. So I actually had a lot of like technical experience around like how APIs work and how they're deployed. And I talk about it a little bit of like how I found my first API vulnerability, but the reason why I found it is because most RESTful APIs are not implemented correctly. Most RESTful APIs do not use the verbs delete and the verb put. Most just use get and post, and there's usually a little flag in like the JSON payload for the API that tells it what HTTP method to use really. And because I saw put being in like an actual API request, I was like, okay, there is no way a developer wrote that API correctly. And there wasn't. It was like pre-generated code. So I don't think you need to do a lot of practice on CTFs. And I think the sooner you go to looking at a real target, the better, because any CTF is not really going to represent what hacking a real target is like. And to do that, I'm going to show you an example. So I'm going to start a new tab. I'm just going to go to Traceable's website. If I go into proxy here, like you can just see how many requests the homepage makes. Like it is never just one request, and it will keep going. Like it's going to continually call back to different like third parties that we use on the website. If I go in here and I press allow cookies, there's going to be even more of them. Because all of this is powered like every single time I go to a different page, again, there's going to be tons of API, like tons of requests in there, and it's really, really noisy. The sooner you can get used to dealing with this overwhelming amount of information, the better. So like by contrast, if I just go to Juice Shop here, you can see that after the page loads, it doesn't really make any more requests. Real websites continually make them again. Can you once again explain how you do color code the request systematically? Yes, absolutely. So it is a add-on here called PwnFox. So what you do to install it is you go to GitHub. This one is the one for Chrome. So if you are a Chrome user, you can use this one. I'm going to put this in the chat. And what you're going to do, you're going to go to releases, and then you're going to go to 1.0.3. I'll put that in the chat as well. This is the burp plugin here. This is the jar file, and you're just going to install that in extensions here. You're just going to press your add, find the jar file in your downloads folder, etc. And then just load it up. Then you're going to go to the Firefox add-on, and then just install it the same way you'd install any other Firefox add-on. What I do is I turn off Proxify all tabs. So that means if I'm not using PwnFox, like one of the colored tabs here, it's not going to send my traffic to burp. It just means you can see here, like if I refresh this page, like it's not coming up in burp. It really helps just cut out some of the noise. So I know that if I've not got a color on the tab, it's not going to send to burp. Also, as somebody who like shares my screen, it gives me confidence that I'm not going to like accidentally put something sensitive like one of my real cookies, say for Google. It just means that I have that as well. And again, like if I use Safari, so I have another screen open that has Safari on it that I can like put references on when I want to look something up. But if you do already use Firefox, it can be a really great way to also kind of put your hacking on one side and not have to worry about every other tab you've got open. So if you have, Facebook open or whatever. So I switch off Proxify all tabs and I switch on Proxify only container tabs. So only the ones down here that have a color will actually go into burp. It also has, remove security headers, add container headers. I don't tend to use them. There's like toolbox, whatever. I tend to go into here and just go, I'm going to start a whatever, like a orange tab, and then I'm going to access, Traceable's website, whatever. And now it's all going to be orange. Super helpful for API hacking because, again, we do see so many different like API requests, especially when we do in a second where we start to look at like, okay, we need multiple user accounts, we need multiple tabs open, whatever, makes it a lot easier. Because all of these, by the way, if it wasn't clear, are also what are called Firefox containers. So this like website, this tab isn't logged into this account. It's actually not logged into any account. We start to look at like bolas and cross user and cross organization. If you're testing like cloud stuff, then you're going to need this. So next thing to do, once you understand how something works, you've got all set up, is to make some accounts. Now, when we're testing real accounts, we want to make sure that we're not going to interfere with genuine people who are using a piece of software. So what I always do is I make usually like 3 accounts. It depends on what I'm testing, but usually I'll make some kind of account that has OWASP GShop is a VM on your laptop. Yes, it's running through Docker. I'll just share that as well, just in case people want to use GShop. I recommend, by the way, as I'm doing this, that you just look at a real website. Like you may as well skip that part and just go straight to the website. Can be done using VMware? Probably. You can just install it directly from source as well. So yeah, it's a huge, I love this extension so much. It has genuinely, as someone who's dyslexic as well, like all cookies start like EYJ, okay? And my brain is like, those are the same cookie. And you don't want to embarrass yourself when it comes to like triage and you're like, I found a vulnerability. And a triager is like, no, you just can't read. So when you create accounts, I recommend creating usually 3 accounts. Depends on the application though. So you want a user that has a high permission, a user with a low permission, and kind of a guest user. Now, if you're testing something like an enterprise where you have the idea of like tenanted applications, so you're maybe testing a product like Traceable, right? So Traceable is like a cloud product that companies have their own instances and they can assign like accounts within those instances. So your company A, you've got person A, B, and C who work for you. They should only be able to see the Traceable instance for company A, not for company B. And that being able to see cross instances is very, very common because often the permissions will not necessarily be tied to the tenant. So they won't be, you have admin access to company A, they'll go, you just have admin access. So that's a really, really common vulnerability that you see all the time, is where you have like cross tenancy because you've got the permission in one tenant, a developer will mess up and forget an if statement and be able to do it to another one. Now, because this isn't this kind of application, I'm going to have 3 tabs open and then have 2 accounts. So I've got my katie@blair.com. I'm also going to make katie2@blair.com. And I'm just going to type in the password again. Oh. And then I'm just going to log it into my new account. So this account is Katie2, this tab, Katie1. what I would probably do is not name them 1 and 2. And I say this because I have tested applications where I named them 1 and 2, and I got so confused because I had then 3, 4, because it was a tenanted application. Yeah, don't name them 1 and 2. Try and be a bit more descriptive. But now I can easily test for like cross account stuff. So I go through functionality basically one at a time. So I'm looking at apple juice, add to basket, apple pommes, add to basket, banana juice, add to basket. I can go into this one and add, the carrot juice, for example, down here. And so this one has a basket containing just carrot juice, and this one has a basket containing apple and banana juice. So when I have a look here, I'm trying to understand how the basket code actually differentiates between the two. Now you'll see my screen is very big here, so I want to make sure people can read it because burp is kind of small. But you can see here, we're already seeing the word REST. Instantly, you see the word like REST, API. If you see like some kind of noun and then a number, so basket 1, they're like good signs you're looking at an API. Any single time you see JSON, so JSON looks like this. It uses keys and values. Oops. Like this. Any single time you see something like that, you should always be thinking, is that an API? If you see like encoded things like JWTs, EYJ is equal to this character. So that's why they always start with like EYJ. So I'm already thinking, okay, so it knows that it's this basket because it's this says it has the word 6 and the word 7. So if I was to test things like cross user here, so for example, this is my legitimate account that's got the apple juice, the apple pommes, and the banana juice in. If I want to test that, but with the cookie of number 7 here, this is how you would do it. Now, in some cases, you could just go into this. If I grab this one right here, I'm going to send that to repeater. I can do what I did before, which is essentially change this 7 to a 6. I know that number 6 is the other account that I have. So I know what's in that basket. And so I know what a false positive would look like. Like if this showed me just like an empty basket, it's probably a false positive. It returning a 200 status code is not necessarily enough there. So great. Right. So I'm going to go into there and access a basket that I shouldn't have permission to access, which is really great if your basket or if what's being controlled is a single number. When you're looking at a real website, it may not be the case. So instead, we're going to copy the cookies. Now, there are different ways that APIs and applications in general do authorization or authentication, right? Again, you can see this starts EYJ, so is some JSON code. You're gonna automatically, decode it, please. Oh, it's because it's got a dot in it, that's why. Going here, there we go. Right, you can see this is a JWT here. You see what it says, like start of JSON type JWT here. So we know this is some kind of authorization. Now we can go into this and see here, I just do this part here. You can see we've got a status success, data contains my ID, my username, my password, etc. So can anyone tell me if this is a JWT, can we modify this payload? Does anybody know if we can modify this payload? So let's say it changed from KT2 to like my first account, KT1, by just removing the 2 there. So we got some yeses in the chat. It depends how well it's programmed. So by default, the way a JWT works is it's split into 3 parts. So it's split into header. See over here if I have a look. So it's split into 3 parts. This top part is the header. This middle part is the payload, and this bottom part is what's called the signature. So if I paste this is the one I've just copied from the bearer token in. So we can see it's a JWT, which we knew because they're always JWTs. We've got a status success, a bunch of data about our account, some created at, etc. And then we have the signature. Now, if this JWT is coded correctly, if we were to change this and make it kt1, it wouldn't accept it because the signature wouldn't match because we don't know the secret here. Oh, I think it's a one, yeah. I'll use this one to go as an example. Now you'll notice that as I change the value of this that bottom part here actually changes. And that's how we wouldn't be able to actually change this. So we would check, of course, this would be something we add to our list of things to check, see if it's actually being checked. But for the most part, it usually won't work. But let's have a go. So I'm going to copy this third part here, just the purple text, and I'm just going to copy the same one up to the dot here as well, and I'm going to paste it. Now, what I'm expecting this to do is not work, by the way. And you can see here, the error is invalid signature. And that's because we don't know what the secret key was to assign it. So when you are looking at cookies, I wouldn't, especially on real applications, I wouldn't really bother to try and change that value. What I would do, and because you've got multiple things running at once, is I would do what I call the cookie trick. So I'm going to send this to repeater, and I'm going to send this to repeater. Now, this is my request for user 7. So user 7, kt2. This is user 6, kt. So what I'm trying to do is use user 7's cookie on user 6's request. Now, this is cross-user. User 6's cookie on the request for user 7. People get it mixed up and they're like me, I've been screwed over by a bug bounty. You haven't. I promise you're fine. So we're going to copy everything that looks minor, gives us authentication vibes. So I'm going to copy the bearer token like so. And then I'm just going to paste it over the bearer token in this request. I'm going to go to this one and I'm going to copy the cookie like so. And I'm just going to replace the cookie here. Now, on a real application, requests are not going to look this nice. There's going to be a ton of overwhelming information in them. But just try and break it down. If it starts EJY, it's a JSON, so I'll copy it. And so I'm going to paste it and you'll see it's a success. So what I've done here is used user 7, their cookie, replacing user 6 with that cookie in that request. Now, if this affected user 7, the cookie that we've copied over account, that is not a vulnerability. That's not a bowler. That's not an API issue. That is just how the application is supposed to work. So that's our first vulnerability, being able to test for bowler types. And guys, I cannot stress how common bowlers are in APIs. It is by far, by a significant amount, the most common API security issue, especially in a large API, because they are, one, so difficult to test for, because as you can see, it kind of took us thinking a little bit about, okay, I've got user 7 and then user 6, so I can access user 6's resources with user 7's cookies. That aspect of it means you kind of need a human in there somewhere to think about it. Really hard to automate the testing for that, because what success looks like isn't necessarily easy, because if I was to say access, I don't know, I'm going to go for a basket that probably doesn't exist. So if I try and ask for a basket 1,000, you'll see here that it's still giving a 200. There's still a value in there that says status success. Like, it's very hard programmatically to recognize one of those, which plug if you have API security product like Traceable, huge helpful, because it can do that marketing. So let's continue to take a look here. So we know we can access other people's baskets. So whenever we see a bowler issue, like, bowlers do not appear on their own. Bowlers usually resort from like sloppy development practices. So we can just continually test for them. If we're going to go and change anything, so let's go check out the user profile. We can set a username, set the username, go into proxy, find the request. Let's see what we got. What actually has the data in it? Yeah, here where we've got a username, we're going to go into repeater. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to go into kt2's cookie. So what I'll do, if I'm not sure which one I'm on, I'll just go in and just refresh and just grab whatever from the latest request here. So I'm going to go into here. This is my green, and I've got it from my blue account. Again, I'm just going to go and replace the bearer token. Oh, whoops, I didn't copy that properly. In here. And same thing, just also going to grab the cookie, because we don't necessarily know which one is being used, and we could find out, but it's a bit lazy of me not to bother. I'm going to press send and see what happens. Oh, wrong request. Whoops. And this is the one I need to change. Make sure it's the send that. And you can see here that I've made a 302 found. So let's see if I can change the username to be something else. I'll press send. Now the question is, which one of my accounts has now been updated? So if I refresh the page, hit account and account. So if I go here and I go here, you can see this one still has my original one, which is FASF. And this one has my one that's a bunch of numbers. Can anyone tell me why this is not vulnerable to a bowler? Or why you think it may not be vulnerable? So the vulnerability hasn't worked here. It hasn't worked on the profile. Can anyone guess why from just looking at the request? Any kind of thoughts? So just to summarize what I did, I took a green request from one account. Oh, sorry, a blue request from one account, repeated it, changing the cookies from the blue account to the green account, but the actual, when I sent the request, it only affected the green account, so the one I copied the cookies from. So it's not a bowler, because it's only if we could have done it to blue's account from green's account. Like, green's cookies, blue's accounts, green's cookies, green account doesn't really work. So anybody want to guess why it didn't work, or wants to suggest why it may not have worked? I'll give people time to have a think and have a read of the screen. So in an API, when we've got this API endpoint here, which part of it, I'm going to put it in here. Which part of it defines which resource we're looking for? Like, so that's our RESTful API code here. I'm gonna really mess up your name. Guakisa is right, by the way, very correct in what they are saying. But in an API, and the reason why bolas appear in APIs is because we have that 1000, we have that ID parameter, right? If we have the ID parameter in there, then it's using that and it's not checking the cookies. In this case, there's no reference to an ID parameter in here. We've got like just profile. So this piece of code is using the cookie or the bearer token because we can see that there is no other like piece of data for it to use to check the account. So bolas occur when the application does not check for an individual user, which is usually via its authentication, is logged in before actually enabling them to edit a resource. If there's no parameter, like there's no ID parameters, there's nothing to check. So you can pretty much, if it doesn't have an ID parameter that you can see, it might be a UUID, it might be a numeric ID, it might be something else. If you can't see an ID parameter, don't try. Don't even look for bolas, right? No ID parameter, then you go somewhere else, right? Like you already know it is not worth trying to find those vulnerabilities. So let's continue to have a look at the application then. Again, we think core functionality. Now, what's a little bit different in like a bug bounty scenario versus the pen test scenario is that there's an element of like competition there, which is like what has like the people already checked. And I'm not going to get too into like that meta gaming aspect of like hacking. But I'm going to assume that you're going to look for everything. But I just want people to be aware that there is like a metagaming aspect of what haven't people looked at before. And then that's like strategic. So when we were testing the basket here earlier, there's a classic like vulnerability here. And the reason why I always remember this vulnerability is because I actually found one and didn't even notice. So when you add things to your basket, if I go this one here, you can see we have as product ID, a basket ID, and then a quantity. Now, what happens if instead of having like one here, you have like 1,000? So there is some kind of stock check. So we can't add 1,000. But what about negative numbers? So what you can sometimes do is that on quantities on e-commerce websites, you can specify a negative quantity and it will like take away from the price. Hasn't worked in this case, but always worth checking on e-commerce. And it is the one vulnerability I always remember because I messed it up. So again, thinking about, checking out, I think I remember seeing like the idea of a digital wallet. There is, yeah. So we can add things to our wallet and see what happens. And again, initially with a lot of this, I'm first testing it just to understand how it works and what the flow looks like. And then I'm doing everything else. Because here's the interesting part of this, right? Is like which one of these, like 6 requests, actually changed the wallet amount, and which one actually like changed the payment amount. So I'm already seeing in here that there is like this idea. So we've got like a REST wallet balance here and here, some API going to cards, okay, some application configuration, always really interesting to see, of course. But in the balance here, I'm seeing like a payment ID. So I'm wondering, okay, where's that payment ID coming from? And like is that associated with like an amount? So what happens if I make this like another payment ID? Let's say I go for like a smaller number like 5 and it says payment not accepted. Okay, so what happens if I go to like 9 or something else that doesn't exist? Payment not accepted. if I go to 7 and I increase the amount, like so, what are we doing? Okay, we've got a success and we've managed to add things. But I guess the question is what is actually increasing there? I'm guessing that that's also saying it's made a payment? Don't know. I'm gonna come. Oh, I did some kind of. I did something because it gave me a success. So let's see. What did you actually? What did I actually get what did I get the prize for? Try and guess the scoreboard. Okay, interesting. Come back to that. So a lot of this is what I'm looking for is like, what is the flow that increases the amount of like money in our wallet, and like what is taking the payment? So what I'm looking for here is just trying to see what that payment ID could be. Now, based on this and based on what I'm looking at, I think it's just our user ID. Because if I go into here and I do another payment, make sure it has enough thingies in this. There we go. I submit that and I send that and go continue. So how does it know which card is which? So that's the card information going in. Ah, that's interesting. Okay, so we're seeing some payment data here. So let's have another look at this into repeater. So this must be grabbing the card associated with a user, I'm guessing. So the one that's put API cards, send to repeater, send that. So looking at this has the ID 7, this is the user ID of 22. Now that's really interesting because I was thinking the 7 and the 8 are actually user IDs, but there's another user ID in here. That is always really good information to know. If you're using like Burp Pro, my recommendation would be whenever you see a new ID, do a search. If you're not using Burp Pro, you can use an extension called Logger++, which is made by a very good friend of mine, Corey, who also lives in Manchester. So Manchester is officially God City. Has all of these like different features, but it gives you search on the free version of Burp. And I should say as well, I did do a challenge to myself where I was like, I'm going to see how many vulnerabilities I can find and how long it would take me to pay for Burp Pro. To me, one vulnerability, I found it with community. So you do not need to pay. So again, the next thing we want to be thinking here is like how does it work? Like how does this all actually come together? Because what we should be thinking now is, okay, what's actually taking the payment? How does it know? Now, looking at this payment ID being 7, looking at this saying ID 7, maybe potentially it's API cards that's actually controlling this. Something else that's really interesting about this API and something else I noticed is like we've got API/cards and then we've got REST wallet balance, which is weird. Like that suggests there'd be 2 different APIs. Not impossible, but weird. So we should be thinking here whenever you're looking at payment data is like, how does the payment flow through the system? Like, how does it know which card is yours? How does it know which payment method is yours? How does it know where you're logged in as? All of that stuff. Because the first thing I'm thinking is, you know what, like if I tell it to make $100 payment, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the intercept functionality. This will stop the request before it gets sent. If your burp ever stops working, just double check that you've not accidentally left intercept on. And I'm going to forward it and I'm going to see what that actually does. Interesting. So it's payment not accepted. Suggests to me probably not vulnerable to a Bowler API vulnerability. And I'm just going to switch intercept off. What I try and do with any of my hacking, I know we're coming up to time here, is always to well, mine's going back. Always to kind of sniff on something. If it's not working, move on very quickly, because you don't necessarily want to be caught up in functionality that actually isn't going to be vulnerable, particularly across APIs, because your time is always better spent going through like and testing for bowlers, right? Because it is a balance of probability. You will eventually find one. So really making sure that you're not necessarily giving up, but giving up at the appropriate time. So we are almost at time. Feel free to put any questions like in the chat or in the little Q&A box while you have me. And we can talk some more about it. Again, really do recommend like in terms of extensions for API hacking, by the way, really recommend Logger++. There is also, there's a few actually for GraphQL now. So in QL, again, you can install that on like the free version of Burp. You don't actually need to pay for it. And it has a lot of really good things for working with GraphQL APIs. I do intend to do a separate session on GraphQL because the like vulnerabilities are the same. Like I don't want to confuse it. Like they is exactly the same. It's exactly the same as like anything else. But the approach and like how you write it means that look, it's the end of the UK working day. The way you write it and the way you interface with the API is quite different, but it's the exact same vulnerabilities. I cannot stress how much it is. Next time we'll be continuing doing this. I'll show you some more little ways that I approach API hacking. So we'll do another one of these sessions. Again, bring your own APIs, have a go. I do really recommend, look at what your web browser actually sends. It is not a crime. Sounds so bad. It's definitely not a crime to just look and see what a real website looks like. So if we have a look here at YouTube, right? Like it's so overwhelming. The sooner you can get used to this and you like train yourself to not get completely overwhelmed, the easier you will find it to approach any kind of testing. Because if you do just get caught on CTFs all the time, you just won't get used to it and you will always find it really, really hard to swap to a real target. But any questions in the chat, do feel free to leave. But we are at time now, so I will see you guys next time. We're going to do the same thing, exactly the same. We'll do some hacking together, bring your API. Hopefully you have found this session useful or helpful or hopefully just encouraging, right? Like have a go at API hacking yourself. I can do it. It can't be that but it's been a pleasure to chat with you all. Oh yeah, the color coding. Oh, Pwn Fox, complete game changer. Naham said to me, "It's like, Katie, do you know, like, if I was to do a video on like tools, what would you say?" I was like, "Has anyone picked Pwn Fox? Like, I will have that one, please." Love it. I love it so much. It's fantastic. Well, if there are no questions, thank you very much, everybody, for watching, and we will see you in the next API Security Masterclass. Same hacking next month. I'll see you all then. Bye, everyone.